Hello everyone and welcome to the finals of the FIDE World Cup. We are in the first game of the classical time format. It is Praggnanandhaa versus Magnus Carlsen, and for the occasion I even used their updated ratings. These are the live ratings, so before the game Prag was at 2723.4 and the Magnus on 2842.6, so quite a bit of a difference. But if Prag wants to win, he has to do it against one of the, if not the greatest player of all times, Magnus Carlsen. And, well, we've had the appetizer, the game between Nijat Abbasov and Fabiano Caruana. That definitely got us going, and now it's time for the main course. Prag has the white pieces, and he opens with pawn to c4. He opts for the English opening, and Magnus did not arrive late. He arrived basically 2 seconds before the clocks were started. He, offered a handshake, and then he took quite some time to make the first move. He always has that ritual. He first, sets up every piece perfectly in the center of the square. Then he writes everything down, then he looks at the board, and only then did he proceed to play pawn to e5. And okay, we have the English, and as every time we have the English, we will have the 4 knights of the English. Knight c3, knight to f6, knight to f3, and knight to c6. Prag goes for pawn to g3 and pawn to d5 by Magnus. We have c captures, knight captures, and now bishop to g2. So fairly standard stuff. Knight back to f6, Magnus goes for well, a bit of a different line. Usually bishop to c5 is played, and now he basically brings his piece back, which kind of breaks the chess principle. Do not move the same piece twice in the opening, but of course he knows what he's doing, and it has been played before. Usually people just castle here or play pawn to a3, but Prag goes for pawn to b4, and I love seeing pawn to b4. I love seeing it in every position. I've never seen it in a position quite like this before, and you can't really capture it. Of course, you're not going to capture it with the knight because nothing is defending your e5 pawn if you do that. And of course, if you play bishop captures on b4, then again knight captures on e5, you just remove the defender of the bishop here. And if knight captures on e5, queen to a4 comes with check. Okay, you block with knight to c6, you again defend the bishop, but now bishop captures on c6 with check. B captures, and now queen captures on b4, prevents the black king from castling. White is doing very well here. So obviously Magnus will not be capturing the b4 pawn, but that also means that then he has to be worried about pawn to b5 and dislodging the knight from c6. So what can he do about this? Well, he goes for bishop to d6. He just adds another defender to the e5 pawn. And okay, Prag goes pawn to b5, knight to d4. And now we have queen to a4. Prag took a little bit of time to go for this, but not too much. It was Magnus who was burning a lot of time in the opening. For the first 3 moves, for the first couple of moves, Prag basically played at everything within a minute, and Magnus already spent some 20 minutes on the clock. And here there are quite a few lines you could go choose from. One very interesting one is pawn to c5. I'm just going to show it because it's a lot of fun. Pawn captures, knight goes back with captures, and now knight to b5, going after the bishop here. And you might think, all right, the queen is already defending the bishop, not a problem. I'll just castle here, and already you blunder the game. Knight captures, queen captures, and bishop to a3 with a beautiful skewer here. So you have to be careful. Magnus plays the absolute best move. Knight captures on f3 with check. We have bishop captures, and now castles by both players. Castles with pawn to a6. Now, of course, this is never an idea because the rook on a8 is undefended, but the bishop will get developed at some point. We have bishop to d3, opting for bishop to g5. And here, what do you play? It's such a fine position. Now, here h6 was played. Obviously, you do not want to see bishop to g5 on the board. But now, what do you play next? Again. So many possibilities here. Do you go for something like bishop to a3? This is what Prag went for. I'm just going to show you a really fun line with rook to b1, as it's classical chess, so we should explore a couple of lines. Look at this: queen to e7, now bishop to e3 and bishop to d7, not allowing the pawn capture on a6 or anything. Queen back to c2, now comes a captures on b5, knight captures on b5, and now this very tricky pawn to e4 move. So the idea is, of course, bringing the bishop to c6, and now if bishop captures on e4, you're just going to capture on e4, d captures bishop to c6, and you are very, very happy with your position here. White does not have a light square bishop. You do have a light square bishop. If this diagonal fully opens up, white will have, well, quite a lot to worry about. F3 will have to be played, but that will also give white a very tricky position to handle. But okay, instead, after this pawn to h6, we have bishop to a3, offering to trade off the dark square bishops, and now comes rook to b8 by Magnus. Here, he also spent quite a lot of time, because if you can pull off bishop to d7 or bishop to h3, then it should be a well, it should be a great position for black. The problem is bishop to h3 is almost impossible to calculate. Magnus really tried, but just to give you an example, bishop captures on b7, and now let's say you go for a captures on b5. You attack the white queen here. You're going to play queen captures on a8, queen captures on a8. Now comes bishop captures on a8 and bishop captures on f1. Bishop captures on d6 with check, c captures, c captures, and now king captures on f1. Pawn to b4 chases away the knight, knight to d5, and rook captures on a8. We have knight captures on b4, and after this capture fest is over, it will be Pragg who will be up a pawn, and it will be the passed a pawn. So not the absolute best. However, there is one other thing you could try after bishop to h3. After bishop captures on b7, let's not go for a captures on b5. Let's go for bishop captures on f1 instead. So bishop captures on f1, rook captures on f1, and only now a captures on b5. Queen captures on a8, queen captures, bishop captures, and now rook captures on a8, bishop captures on d6, c captures on d6, and you end up with this position where, okay, you could, let's say, capture on b5, but if you capture on b5, then rook captures on a2, knight captures on d6, and rook captures on e2. You again end up with a position where it's equal material, but Magnus, okay, he does have the intact pawn structure. Pragg has the isolated d pawn. You know, it's not much to work with, so that doesn't really do all that much for him. So bishop to h3, definitely a possibility, but it doesn't yield all that much. Bishop to d7, on the other hand, could be played many different ways, but well, we want to throw in this a captures on b5 move in pretty much all of the lines. Even if you start with bishop captures on at d6, now comes a captures on b5, going after the white queen here, and now you're first going to throw in a nice position. So bishop captures on c7, queen captures on c7, and now queen to b3 or queen to b4. We end up with, well, it's equal material, but Magnus would have a doubled b pawn. But it still looks very, very strong, especially with the bishop controlling the a4 square. You can never get a4 in. Everything controls it. Also looks, I mean, it looks very nice. So you could play it, but Magnus doesn't like either of this. Commentators thought that maybe it's because it was too drawish and Magnus wanted something more, so he opted for rook to b8. And okay, bishop to d7, first bishop captures on d6, c captures, and now rook a to b1, and now a captures on b5. Okay, queen captures on b5, and now bishop to d7. So Pragg does have a very good pressure against the b7 pawn, but he first has to tend to the queen. Queen to b6, and now Magnus finds a move that solves all of his problems, and that is bishop to c6. Problem being a tactical one. If Pragg captures on c6, okay, you can play this, but then queen captures on c6 is met with rook c8, and you blunder the knight on c3. So this is out of the question. Queen captures on d8 is what Pragg plays. We have rook f captures on d8, and only now bishop captures on c6. We have b captures on c6, and now you could choose from a lot of moves, like a4 is a move, rook captures on b8 is a move. Yeah, you could start with pawn to f4. Pawn to f4 is actually very nice. For example, e captures, you trade rooks, captures, and now you take on f4 with the rook. Let's say pawn to d5, and it's a nice position for Pragg. He always has the passed a pawn that he can push, but Magnus has the center, and he will also be able to create a passed pawn at some point. But instead, after bishop captures on c6, Pragg just goes king to g2. No, not rushing it in any way. Now Magnus shifts the attention over to the passed a pawn. We have rook to b6. Now Pragg goes after the c6 pawn, and Magnus has a couple of ways of dealing with this. He could go knight to d5. It's a very nice idea, where you could double black's pawns here, or you could just trade everything. Rook captures, knight captures, rook captures on c3, and rook captures on a2, and you end up with the exact same position, pretty much, almost even the same pawn structure. This would, of course, be a drawn position. So rook d to c8, Magnus wants to keep chances alive. He just defends the pawn, and now rook to c1. We have pawn to d5, and now rook to c2, guarding the a2 pawn. We have knight to d7, attacking the rook, and now rook back to b1. We have knight to c5, and now we have rook b to c1, doubling up on the c file. Now the knight will move, and you will put a lot of pressure on the c file. So rook to a5, and now knight to b1, threatening to capture the knight here. But Magnus, of course, calculated everything, knight to e6. And now you could go for an all-out trade. Rook captures on c6, rook captures. We have rook captures on a2, knight to c3, and now rook to c2. We have knight captures on d5, rook captures on e2, and okay, again, you have the pretty much the exact same position that we already reached from that position, but you can even go for further trades. Knight e3, let's say rook d2, go after the pawn, knight c4 goes after the e5 pawn, captures, attacks the rook moves, and okay, I mean, the 3 pawns on the same side of the board. Of course, it's a dead draw. So after this, knight to d2 was played. We have rook c to a8. Magnus doubles up on the a file. Knight to f3, and now pawn to e4. This is how Magnus wants to keep chances alive. Captures, attacks the knight, knight to d2, and now, of course, even pawn to e3. Sacrifices a pawn to mess up Prague's pawn structure, but Pragg doesn't go for it. He just goes knight c4, attacks the rook, and will capture on e3 with the knight. So rook captures on a2, knight captures on e3. We have knight to d4 now attacking the rook, and just rook captures on a2. We have rook captures on a2, rook to c4 now goes after the knight, and Magnus offers a draw by basically by saying a joke. He plays pawn to c5. It's a draw offer if Pragg captures. Of course, he captures on e2, and that's it. So rook captures on c5 was played. Rook captures on e2, and he was in this position on move 35 that Pragg and Magnus agreed to a draw, as there is nothing more to be done here. Pretty completely equal position. 3 pawns on the same side of the board, knight and rook. And there's no point in playing this. Both of them had enough time on the clock, and when you're this good, then this is basically a draw by insufficient material. So very nice game. It definitely looked like Magnus couldn't do anything, and Pragg was the one running the show, but Pragg had the white pieces in this game, and as soon as Magnus equalized, there was really nothing to hope for anymore. So now Magnus will have the white pieces, and it's a question, will Pragg be able to equalize as quickly as Magnus did, or maybe he will even be able to go for something. It's hard to say. Or was this Prague's idea all along? Does he want to is the idea to draw the classical games and then look for chances in faster time formats, or was this just a case of excellent preparation being met with excellent preparation? So it's hard to say. I'm just here to enjoy the show, and hoping you guys are as well. So yeah, that's the game. Hope you guys enjoyed it. We'll see what happens in round 2 of the classical. This was wonderful to watch. I would like to wish a very happy birthday to Bram, and I would like to thank Wives and Lovers, Robert Bloom, GuernseyChessFestival.org.gg, and Phil Malthus for your contribution to my channel. Thank you a lot. I really appreciate it. As usual, you can check 2 of my previous videos here. Thank you for watching, and I will see you soon, continuing the coverage of the FIDE World Cup finals until it finishes. So thank you all. I will see you soon, and have an excellent rest of your day. And what do you think? What will Magnus open with the white pieces in tomorrow's game? See you soon.